I'd like to call the public hearing of the Board of Finance to order on April 8th, 2015 at 6 o'clock. And the public hearing pertains to the capital and operating budgets as presented in the legal notice that was in the Hartford Courant. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this lovely evening. Hopefully it doesn't snow. What we have here is the agenda, what we're trying to accomplish tonight. Basically, we're going to have 4 presentations. The first one will be mine, an overview on the budget from the Board of Finance. My name is Peter Askham. We're going to have the Board of Education operating budget presented by Mike Goldman. We'll then have the town operating budget presented by Lisa Heavner, the first selectman. And then the capital budget presentations will be by Jeff Shea and Burke LeClaire. First of all, though, I'd like to make a couple opening comments. I'd like to thank SCTV for televising this. We really appreciate it. I think it's good to get this information out to the public. Also, I'd like to thank the Superintendent, Matt Curtis, and all the Board of Ed members for their excellent job in their budget, and Burke LeClaire, the business manager, for doing a great job. We had a lot of work this year, and they did a great job. Also, our new first selectman, Lisa Heavner, your first budget, it was great. She was fantastic. We really appreciate it. It was good working with her and the whole Board of Selectmen. We did a lot of good things, and also my board members that have been asking a lot of tough questions the last couple of months. So I'd like to thank Nick Mason, our vice chair, Barb Pettigene, Linda Schofield, Maura Wertheimer, and Jeff Blumenthal. Thank you for all your hard work. And last but not least, the finance director of the town, Joe Mancini, who's been with us for a year. So Joe's had to put up with me with almost daily phone calls on issues for a long time, so he's probably glad we're coming to the end. So thank you and all the town staff, because everyone did an excellent job, and I think you'll see during the budget result we had a good result. So I'd like to thank everyone. Now, on our presentation, let's say after presentations, we're not going to have any questions until we've gone through the 4 presentations. And then we'll have I'll open the meeting up for public audience on the operating and capital at the same time. So if anyone has any questions, what we'll do is we'll come down to the mic, state your name and address. You get 3 minutes to speak to the issues that were presented, the merits tonight. So if it's on the operating budget or capital, you can speak to it. If it's on something else, please try not to, because we're here just to talk about the budget. You know, if you have other issues, talk to the respective boards at their meetings. And then at the end of that, we'll close this public hearing off, and then our board will have another meeting following this, and we could move on the budget at that. So moving on to our presentation, the Board of Finance, as you know, we're an elected citizen oversight board. We're basically responsible for setting goals and establishing the mill rate. That's our primary job. We have fiscal oversight of the town pension trust and other post-employment benefit trust, or OPEB as it's referred to. We also approve the operating and capital budgets, and we set the bond language, and we do the approval of capital budgets. And then finally, we set the mill rate. So after the referendum that night after we have a meeting, we set the mill rate after that. Our board set up some goals, which we operated on for this year. We have, one of our major goals was to keep a low or flat mill rate. We want to maintain our AAA bond rating, which we've had for a few years. We like to keep our debt service capital, total capital acquisitions under 7%. We want to ensure Simsbury Farms is fiscally stable, and what we've had there is we had a little bit of operating deficit for the last few years, and we did some fixes to that so we have more stability there financially. Also, we always look to ensure long-term fiscal discipline. We have some policies and procedures that we've followed for a long time, and we want to make sure that the town sticks to good long-term fiscal discipline, and I think you'll see that throughout the presentation. And then finally, we did something a little more creative this year. I don't know if it's creative is a proper term, but we looked at our fund balances and we tried to use them to lower taxes. So you're going to see through both boards' presentations that we were able to get some tax relief by the way we used reserves. So basically, this is the overview of the operating budgets that you'll see. The Board of Selectmen is up $156,000 this year to last, which is a 0.84% increase. I'll have to note in there that we asked them, our board, the Board of Finance, asked the Board of Selectmen to put $90,000 extra into their budget to go to Simsbury Farms to help with that financial situation. So their budget's only up $156,000, which 90 of it we put in and asked them to take. So if they didn't have that, their budget would even be less. So you're going to blame us for that, but it makes the Simsbury Farms situation a lot more stable, and I think it makes sense to do that. You'll see the debt retirement / capital is the same as prior year. So that's maintaining the same. Board of Ed is up 1.30% or $850,000. Non-public schools, a small category, is up $4,000 or 0.75%. In total, we're up just over $1 million, which is about 1.11%, which is relatively close to the same number we had last year. Now, in the beginning of the budget process, we challenged both boards to come in with a guideline of under 1.7%. So we told both boards that we'd like, because I like to look at the COLA, what the seniors get, and their number was 1.7. So it's hard to ask the seniors, to pay more than they're getting. So 1.7 was the magic number. Both boards came in way under it. We had to do some work to get under it, but we got there, and we really appreciate it, and I think both budgets came in very responsible. This is a pie chart, just kind of give you a little perspective as to the proportion of each budget. The Board of Ed budget's about 72% of the total expenditures. You'll see Board of Selectmen about 20%, and debt retirement is 6.7%. Now, the reason I highlight the 6.7 is, one of our goals is to keep debt service under 7%. So we did it. So there's the 6.7, so that's one of the numbers we look at and we try to manage. Our board has managed the use of capital for many years, and this policy has worked well. On the revenue side, because basically we start off with expenses, then we look at revenue. For a few years revenue wasn't growing, but believe it or not, now it is. So it's you can talk about it. We got a little bit more in grants. We get some fees for services, building permits. Things are starting to happen in town, so we collect a little bit more money there, about $106,000 more. Interest income. We were stuck on $25,000 for the last few years, and we made a conscientious effort through Joe we revisited our policy on how to get more interest there, and he's come up with some wonderful ideas without taking any more risk. Obviously, safety of principle is number one, so we feel very comfortable we can get $125,000 this year, which will give us some budget relief. Final number is taxes to be collected. So this number we'll deal with later on, but this is the number that we have to deal with. So, and this is, we'll get to that about, grand list growth and things like that, but that's the number we need to balance everything. So, next slide, just estimated revenue as far as in proportion. You'll see basically we raised 91% of our budget on the revenue side through taxes. So if we have an expenditure increase, you feel it pretty direct. That's what that tells me. Interest income is now actually, believe it or not, starting to have an impact there. I remember when that number used to be over $1 million, back when there was higher interest rates, so we're starting to get a little impact there, and then grants are about 6.8%, and Our own charges are about 2%. Now, this slide here is, when we started off the budget process, the budgets didn't end up, weren't where they were. They were coming in at higher numbers, and we started working with different policies on the fund balance and various funds and how to use those fund balances to get some budget relief. So we set up some various areas, and for the Board of Ed, we set up what's called a non-lapsing account, which allows us to get some tax relief on that budget of about 0.27%. We pre-funded, as you know, we have a pension and an OPEB plan, and there's what's called a, I don't want to get too technical, but like a past service cost in there. So we did some advanced funding on that, more and above what the actuary said. So this is where we get into our fiscal policies. We funded more than what the actuary told us on both pension and OPEB. So we funded 100% plus. So by doing the plus, we got some savings. And we saved a significant amount here in OPEB. In the pension, we saved a little bit. The Board of Ed was able to do an energy saving project by the way we funded it, and it gave them some more savings. Interest income gives us about 0.14. And then finally, by actually passing on a tax decrease, you get some more. So the mill rate's going to end up at 37.12. It could have been 38.01. So by doing these items, we took 38.01 down to 37.12. So we've been working hard with both boards for the last few months, and I think we got a favorable outcome. I kind of took this slide from Lisa's presentation, so I hope she doesn't mind. But I thought it was, it showed something that, it talks a little bit about our debt service policy. And basically what it is the red areas, if you can see, are interest, the top areas. And you can see over time, the interest has been decreasing. And basically we have more money available to service debt or pay for capital. And the challenge we have is by monitoring that 7% debt policy or capital, how much capital do you get for it? If you're paying 4.5% for interest rates, you don't get as much as if you're paying 1.5 or 2. So recent bond releases have been lower rates. We've refinanced bonds. We're about to do our second one at the end of this month. So you can see we're able to get a little bit more bounce for the dollar that we spend. And we're all the time, we've kept it under 7%. Now, people have asked me about comparability to other towns. Again, Lisa had put it in her slide, the town piece with different towns. So I said, well, let's put the Board of Ed in and take a look at it. Now, these are moving targets with some of these towns because, you know, like ours, we haven't finalized the budget, but this is our tentative budget, and this is as of today, what every town has done as of today. So some of these are moving targets. And you can see on the town side and the Board of Ed side, our town is 0.84, the Board of Ed is 1.3. You can see what Avon's is for the town, Avon's for the Board of Ed. Canton for the Board of Ed. Farmington for the Board of Ed. Glastonbury, both sides, Granby, and West Hartford. We didn't compare it with a DIRG or how the Board of Ed, they do their own, but this is kind of just, you talk to your neighbors, so that's what it is. It's just for your information. I thought it would be informative, but they're not absolute numbers, so don't go to the bank with them, so to speak, because they're changing. Now, we went through what the expenditure increases are, and here's kind of a recap of what we need for both the Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, non-public schools, and debt capital, total of $1.1 million. I made it comparative to a year ago so you can just get a little perspective as to how each board is this year to last. And you can see there's a little bit more dollar increase for Board of Ed, less for the Selectmen, non-public school up a smidgen, and last year we had a decrease in debt retirement. We didn't bond. This year we're bonding, so we're not going to get the decrease. But the end number is pretty close to the same as it was a year ago. So now we have to sit down and say, well, what's the revenue going to be? And then ultimately we set the mill rate. So first thing we do is the assessor does a grand list every year, and he comes out with that February 1st, finally came out with that list. And we had some grand list growth. So a few years ago we couldn't say that, now we can. In the last 2 years we've had some decent grand list growth. So we got about $633,000 of grand list growth. Last year, as you know, we changed the collection rate. We make an assumption that we're going to collect a certain percentage of our taxes. We look historically how we do, and last year we raised it from 98% to 98.5. We feel that that's still a good rate, and we did not raise it this year, so you're not going to get any tax relief from that. A year ago you did. Now the good news is on the supplemental, auto and things that happen after the grand list, we're starting to get more activity. So, and we're getting a better number, a better estimate of that. And thanks to Joe, that's what we're doing. So now we're able to estimate about $175,000 more there, which again gets us some relief. Finally, you add those up, we have more money than we need to balance the budget, so we're going to lower the mill rate. So the end result is the mill rate. So we're going to lower the mill rate a total of $44,935 or 0.02 mils. Then you see the indirect revenue is more because of interest and other fees. So there's the $1,000,001 to the $1,010,000 that we need. So that's basically how we do it. That's the simple math. So the mill rate last year was 37.14, the town mill rate. And we propose to make the town mill rate 37.12, provided all things remain the same. We put the fire district, this was their approved one. I'm not sure if theirs is approved now, but we called to find out, and I believe theirs is probably going to be the same. I can't say, I didn't go to the fire district meeting, but so we can only do this one, but ours is going to decrease. So, going back to our goals, lower flat mill rate. I think we achieved that because we are going to have a lower mill rate. Maintain AAA rating. We haven't done anything to financially impact the town. We're going out to bond this month, so we'll know for sure when we get a new credit report where we are. We've been advised that we still will be AAA, and I hope that advice is good. Debt service is under 7%. We achieved that. We solved the Simsbury Farms, is it fiscally stable, by putting another $90,000 over there, so we solved that problem. And long-term fiscal discipline, we still maintain the long-term discipline. We fund everything 100% like the actuary tells us. We even funded more, so we maintain that discipline. We established a reserve policy. We have adequate reserves at over 12%, which should keep us very good discipline, and rating agencies should like. And then use of fund balance to lower taxes. By that other slide on the waterfall, you can see that we were able to lower taxes by those uses. So I was very happy that we were able to achieve everything. Finally, what I'd like to leave you with is in a budget conclusion, the way I see it, number one, we have a tax decrease, mill rate cut. Sewer fees are $335. They're going to remain the same. They are not going up, they're staying the same. And the capital, as presented, will be under the 7% debt policy and not cause a tax increase. So all the capital that we're going to talk about tonight, if passed, will not cause a tax increase because we've managed the capital by that 7% guideline and it fits in it. So just want to let you know that after tonight's public hearing, we're going to have a meeting, our board, and we could vote on the operating and capital budgets. We're going to discuss them. And if we don't pass them tonight, we'll have another meeting April 16th. But if we pass them tonight, we won't have that meeting. And then finally, the referendum is May 5th at Henry James. And it will look like this. If we pass everything as presented, there'll be the Board of Selectmen budget for $18,867,969 on the question. There'll be the Board of Ed budget of $66,453,005, and then all the others, which are Simsbury Farms. We have the Water Pollution Authority, rental properties. We have capital non-recurring and debt and capital is $13,253,000 gets presented. That will be the third question. In addition, per our charter, any capital item over 1% has to get voted on. And right now on the list of capital, there's 2 of those that are over. One of them, Simsbury Farms, rink and pool improvement for $1.1 million. And the second is the Board of Ed Climate Control for $2,150,000. Oops. With that, I'll thank you, and now we'll move on to Mr. Goldman. We'll do the Board of Ed presentation. Might take a few minutes here to gear it up.
Take me a few minutes to get up here, Peter. Thank you very much. I've managed to do something to my knee, so I'm hobbling around a little bit tonight, but good evening. Tonight I'm going to present an overview of the Board of Education budget for the upcoming year, 2015 and 2016. I'd like to add my words of welcome. I'm glad to see everybody that's taken the time to come out to tonight's meeting. I'd also like to specifically welcome my fellow Board of Education members, Lydia Tadone, who is our chair, sitting right down front. The Board of Ed is a time-consuming volunteer activity in town. We typically do between 30 and 40 meetings a year. And that's assuming we're not in a year when we're doing negotiations, which adds considerably. So it's a big time commitment, and I'm glad to see my fellow Board of Ed members here. I also want to make a point of welcoming our administrative team, Superintendent Matt Curtis, and Assistant Superintendents Sue Homrock Lemke and Aaron Murray, and our business manager down front, Burke Leclerc. So welcome to everyone. As Peter said, my name is Mike Goldman. I am a Board of Ed member for, I guess, going on toward 15 years, I think it is now. I serve on the Board of Ed as chairman of the Personnel Negotiations Committee, chair or co-chair of the Facilities and Enrollment Committee, and as a member of the Curriculum Committee. The budget process for the Board of Ed is a very long, involved process. If any of you have been involved in business budgeting, for a large organization with hundreds of employees, it's very similar to what you've seen. We start in the fall of each year at the building level and department head level, putting numbers together as to what we think our costs are going to be and what we think we might want to add in the way of things that we need to change or improve upon as changes occur in the educational field. The building level requests come up to the district level in late fall for review and input from district staff. District staff then work on them for a period of time before they start talking and presenting their findings on the budget to the board, which starts early January. And we typically go from 2 meetings a month, which is our regular schedule, to weekly meetings, if you include the budget workshops, starting in January. And we usually get a look at the superintendent's recommended budget in the early part of the budget process in January. We're looking at everything. We're drilling down into enrollment numbers, which has been a hot button for us over the last few years, what facilities we need for our enrollment and what we need to be thinking about for the future, special ed costs, what we can do in the way of cooperative efforts, working with the town and working with boards of ed and other towns on cooperative efforts that might save us some money. Contract settlements, a lot of our costs come from employees, so we spend a lot of time on contract settlements. We have a long list, page after page after page, of mandates from the federal and state education agencies, many of which are unfunded, some of which are partially funded. They seem to have lost the idea of full funding on any of this somewhere in the process. Of course, we're also looking at staffing. Staffing is a big part of our costs. Technology costs, the ability to get grant revenue from the various grant programs that are out there. And overriding all of that, we're looking at the history. And our history goes back, our budget history in detail, goes back to 1981. So we're tracking our costs over long periods of time. All of this culminates with the Board of Ed adopting a budget roughly around the end of February, and then spending much of March in discussions with the Board of Finance about what the budget looks like. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about the budget context. talk a little about the return on investment from your tax money that's going to fund what we're doing on the Board of Education. Talk about and show you some of the drivers that are behind the Board of Ed budget for 2015 and 16, and those will be set out in the superintendent's slide that I'll present to you. We adopted an initial budget on February 24th. Then, as I mentioned, we start a meeting process with the Board of Finance, and we also keep getting more information coming in, sort of updates in real time. And the result of all that, the discussion with the Board of Finance and the updates, led to the adoption of a revised budget on March 24th, and the Board of Finance moved that budget forward on March 31st. This presentation will include the cost drivers, the budget history, and some benchmarking of our district with other districts. So as Peter Askham said a few minutes ago, our budget request is $66,453,005. The $850,188 increase represents an increase of 1.3% over last year's budget. We showed you that. This slide, and I realize that we probably need a little less light on the screen, but if you look over to the side, whoop, I didn't want to do that. There's my laser pointer. So we're right down here, 60th of the 70 or 94 districts, I think, or 80th of the 94 districts at a 1.3% increase. So comparably, our budget request is among the lowest reported Board of Ed budgets to date, and the lowest among comparative districts in what's called our DIRG, our District Reference Group. This slide shows you the history of Board of Ed budget increases. It's sort of a snapshot of our budget history and reflects the modest increases that the Board of Ed has seen since 2009-10, which correspond to the national economic downturn as well as our local decline in enrollment. The requested 1.3% budget increase reflects the needs of the district as well as recognizing the need to be fiscally responsible to all our taxpayers. We're always looking at the ways to control costs, and we always will be. In collaboration with the town and Board of Finance, we were able to find savings in areas such as OPEB, which Peter mentioned briefly. That's this other post-employment benefits, and energy, and other areas that impact the bottom line in a number of positive ways. And of course, we want to do that without impacting the quality of our programming and our services to our students, which is our key goal on the Board of Ed. So I'm not going to read all this. If I start reading all these slides to you, I'll put you all to sleep. So that covers, we're going to get into some detail on a number of these things in a minute here as well. Staffing, as I mentioned, is a key component of our costs, big driver, the biggest driver of our costs. And while we're requesting some minor additions in staff this year to address specific needs that we have in the district, this slide demonstrates the overall decline in staffing levels by 50 full-time positions as our enrollment has gone down. During that same time frame, the district has been able to enhance several programs such as elective offerings at the high school and our reading intervention program at the elementary level. And we're able to do so with, as we've shown you, some pretty minimal budget increases. We're going to continue to struggle with the impact of declining enrollment for the next few years, and it's a constant task for us on the Board of Ed, constant balancing act as we get upward pressure on our cost structure and we have declining enrollment. What we do is all about creating great schools for each and every child. We recognize that the success of our school district is important to the overall attractiveness and home values of within our community. In what we have been challenging budgets, it's important that we celebrate our achievement as a district. We're proud of our student achievements in the academic and extracurricular opportunities for our school district that our school district provides. The success of our schools is a result of the collective commitment of our staff, students, and parents and community members who support our ongoing efforts. A couple of things on that. We are ranked #1 best city for young families in Connecticut. This is very positive news for our community overall, as this ranking came out by a leading consumer advocate, NerdWallet, who crunched a lot of data points in coming out with very informed ratings. schools were an important part of the equation, and we received a top rating. So you can see some of the factors that they've listed here: affordability, growth and prosperity, education quality, and family friendliness. The bottom line is we know that schools add value. In terms of Connecticut, recent ratings by Niche position Simsbury as the #2 district in the Metro Hartford area, with both the #1 high school and #1 middle school. Our school district continues to be a very desirable place for our students to learn and grow. And again, I'm not going to try to read through these slides, but best school districts in the Hartford area: Hartford Metro, public high schools, best high school, best public middle school. So great results, getting good value for our taxpayer dollar. Simsbury Public Schools, we're conscious in a global society that we must continue to achieve at high levels, with an all-time high in advanced placement participation at the high school, with almost 73% of students participating in at least one advanced placement offering. As exciting as well was our students' performance on the PISA, the Program for International Assessment, in which Simsbury High School students scored above the international average in all categories tested. And this is sort of to that theme of articles where they compare kids in American schools to kids in other schools around the world. And we think this PISA, this Program for International Assessment, is the best, most qualitative way to look at that question. So we've had great results. You can see over on the chart on the left the percentage rather, of students completing at least one AP course, and continuing to climb. Ongoing efforts to mitigate costs. As I mentioned, we are and will continue to look for ways to control our costs. I mentioned earlier we have a task force called the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force. That task force meets periodically, starting, I think it was originally formed by the board almost 3 years ago now. And we met numerous times to examine the impact of the decline in enrollment that I mentioned on our school facilities. We came to sort of interim conclusions for the time being. That task force will continue to meet as things evolve over the coming months and years. We face some challenging decisions. As the school enrollment declines, we have to start talking about very sensitive issues, including redistricting and the potential of one day perhaps closing a school facility. We have seen districts around Connecticut struggling with the same decline in enrollment start to struggle with that problem, and some have actually announced the closure of some of their school facilities. The conclusion of the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force was that for the moment, that's not a good step for us. It's neither fiscally responsible at this point, nor is it good in terms of programming and curriculum goals. But that is something that we're going to have to continue to look at as things evolve. We are also going to continue to look for ways to engage in cooperative efforts with the town and various other entities. And those are just a few that are up there as examples. So, drivers, again, let me repeat that we want to create great schools for each and every child. The drivers are the budget. As I mentioned several times, the personnel costs that we have are a big driver, the biggest driver on our budget. We're always faced with the obligations under new contracts. As I mentioned earlier, I'm chair of the Personnel Negotiations Committee. I have been in that position basically since I started with the Board of Ed about 14 years ago. I've negotiated along with the help of the district staff and other board members, repeated numbers of contracts. I will tell you that it's a long and arduous process involving literally dozens of meetings in a year in which we are doing that, the contract negotiation. The last several meetings of which culminate at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning after we've been at the negotiation table starting around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a very arduous process. Much of the process is set down by state law as to how we do it. We have a series of lawyers in the room. We have advisors from the business side of our program in the room with us to help us run numbers and look at costs. So it's an exhausting process. But I will tell you that despite the fact that it could become adversarial, it hasn't gotten to that point. There's certainly some arm wrestling that goes on at that table, but the employment or employee groups that we negotiate with have been very conscious of the budget issues that we face every year. They have worked with us very closely on coming up with a budget settlement that everybody can live with. We have made progress, albeit perhaps modest progress, in getting things like increased contributions to benefits and a variety of other things. But we think we've got, when we look across the spectrum of contracts in other districts, we think we've got, we found a very good balance between keeping our costs down and maintaining a group of people that want to continue to work here and provide quality education to our program. So, other drivers, maintaining the class size guidelines. We review these all the time as to where we're at. You know, should we be changing our class size guidelines as time goes by? We have to provide, just because of the world that we're in, increased access to technology, both to students and to teachers. And there's a learning curve and there's a whole process involved in that, and you take on a variety of capital requirements when you increase technological access. Special education transition needs, big issue. It's a big part of our budget. We have to make sure we're serving that population and serving them well. Transportation costs are a big driver of budget. We've had a lot of fluctuation in recent years in fuel costs, of course. And lastly, our pension and other post-employment benefits and insurance obligations. So these are the big drivers. Cost drivers here, we've shown a couple of them. You can see under the top just the special ed certified, non-certified, and out-of-district tuition under special education. Technology, you can see the changes for student devices. We've been able to bring some of the cost of the individual devices down by updating and going to different systems over the last few years. This budget really addresses the need that the administration articulated to the board throughout the whole budget process. And among those needs are additional staffing to address class size at the middle school, as well as an increase of 2 positions to address caseload size and transition needs within our special education programming. In all, our staffing will increase 2 positions net of enrollment-related reductions. Another main driver in our budget is technology. As I mentioned, we're requesting an additional $111,000, you can see that on the slide, to increase access for both students and staff, largely through the purchase of additional Chromebooks and iPads. Now, I don't know if you can see this slide up in the back, a lot of fine print, but that very top item, right, the impact of negotiated contracts with our various employment groups, you can see of the total, that's a big driver, big number. And that's something we struggle with. That'll always be the case. But as I mentioned, we've been able to find a good way, a good pattern of working with our employment groups to employee groups to help us keep our costs down. So again, I'm not going to go through all of this in great detail here, but you can see what the big budget drivers are. Contract, certified staffing changes, technology, some equipment requests, testing and supply materials, software licensing, out-of-district tuition, athletics, and so on. So it comes out to that $2.394 million, 3.65. The reductions then, you can see we have 7 certified staff retirements. That's a net saving number that you can see there. A decrease in enrollment, a decrease of 3 sections due to enrollment, decrease in the defined benefit contribution, decrease in employee health insurance, decrease in the OPEB, actuarially determined obligation, something called the non-lapsing account that Peter referred to earlier, and some energy efficiency savings. So that's our main budget presentation. I just have a couple of last slides to show you. We have a budget called the non-public school budget, and this is some costs that we are required to carry for children who aren't in our school system, but we're required by state regulation to provide certain services, primarily in nursing, transportation, and culture, parks and rec. And again, we have a modest increase in that budget of about $4,000 or 0.75%. That total budget is $537,000. And then the last slide I'll leave you with is just a review again of the staffing proposal that we put forward this year at the elementary, middle school, and high school. and you can see the changes that we've made. These are, if you can see that, these are FTEs, the full-time equivalents. So that's 0.5, 0.33, 0.98, and then a net reduction. At the middle school, I mentioned earlier, we are adding 2 positions at the middle school regarding higher caseloads and higher class sizes. And then we have some changes, special ed at the high school, and a 0.83 job coach on transitional support at the high school. So that's where our costs come from. I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much, and am I passing it over to Lisa now? Let me introduce our first selectman, Lisa Hebner. Thank you.
Are we good? Good evening, everyone. Good. Oh, there we go. That makes me feel better. It's so good to see everyone. I see some new faces out there. It's always good to get public input on our budget. We're very proud of the work we did this year. I wanted to start by thanking everyone who helped work on this budget. I wanted to recognize members of the Board of Selectmen. We've got Nancy Haase, Cheryl Cook, Mike Payne, and Sean Askham. If you could please stand and be recognized for your efforts. Easier said than done. I do want to recognize them because this was a very collaborative and successful budget process, and I couldn't have done it without them. I was pleased to have their advice and support throughout the entire process. I also wanted to recognize the Director of Finance, Joe Mancini, who is up front. Joe, could you wave? I know you don't like to stand. Sean Kimball, who was a great help to me throughout the process as well, and who was responsible for this PowerPoint presentation. Sean, could you give a wave? Tom Cook, who is always giving me fine counsel and advice throughout. Department heads, could you please raise your hands and let people know where you are? Nick, raise your hand too. Let them see you. Okay, thank you guys. And finally, I wanted to recognize and thank members of the Board of Finance, members of the Board of Education, who worked with me personally and with our board in a very collaborative and I thought a very successful manner this year. So thank you to the 3 boards. I wanted to start tonight actually with some great news. The governor announced today that Simsbury is the recipient of a steep grant of $150,000 to complete the construction of the Simsbury Veterans Memorial. This is a very competitive grant, and we're very pleased to be honored with the receipt of it. And I wanted to recognize and thank our town engineer, Jeff Shea. Can you give a wave, Jeff? Who worked with our local veterans and Mary Glassman to apply for this extremely competitive grant. The Board of Selectmen, who we needed their support to apply for it, and they gave their full and wholehearted support for that. I thank them. I also wanted to thank Representative Hampton and Senator Witkos for their efforts and advocacy for this grant at the state level. It really shows how great our community is. They all came together in a very collaborative way to get this important funding for a very important memorial for our veterans, so we're thrilled about that. So I am pleased to present the Board of Selectmen's proposed 2015-2016 budget for your review. The budget request totals $18,867,969, which is a modest increase of 0.84%. This increase responsibly meets the needs of our community in the most cost-effective manner. All right, I'm giving this to Sean. We set 3 primary goals in crafting this year's budget. The first was to maintain fiscal responsibility by delivering quality services in the most cost-effective manner, to ensure responsible stewardship of our natural resources and town assets, to keep Simsbury a vibrant, beautiful, safe, and desirable place to raise a family and do business, and to modernize technology to provide transparency, increase efficiencies, and meet the current and future needs of our residents. I know the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and everyone in this room shares my pride in the major accomplishments of the town this past year. I'll give you a minute to take a look because it's extensive and impressive. I'll point out the Police CALIA National Reaccreditation. That's a very rare accreditation, and we're pleased to have a community policing police force in Simsbury. We managed 18 winter, actually I think that's more than, we had 43 winter storms. 18 over the weekend. We had a bunch of technology initiatives, Silver Bicycle Friendly Award. We unveiled our GIS system to the public. We're very proud of that. You'll see at the bottom, the library opened its 3D printing lab. So there's a lot of excitement going on in town. If we can go to the next slide. The bad thing about going last is you're going to see repetition of theme. But this is one I want to highlight again, although it was mentioned in the Board of Ed's. This is the Nerd Wallet Award, and what they highlighted and I thought was significant was that a medium household in Simsbury can expect to pay 22% of monthly income on homeownership costs, and that's really a phenomenal percent. It really shows that houses for our young families in Simsbury are affordable, and you do get great value, and they highlighted the schools and our trails in this award as well. The primary cost drivers of this year's budget are contractual increases, including salaries, funding for 2 additional police officers to meet the needs from significant economic development projects that have been approved or are received preliminary approval, funding for a public works project administrator to assist with energy efficiency, green technologies, and complex projects in GIS work order systems, an increase of $90,000 to address a year-over-year gap in the Simsbury Farm Special Revenue Fund, which Peter referred to earlier in his presentation, the filling of the assistant assessor position, and just the usual material costs that we use on day-to-day projects like roads and buildings. As you can see, the town of Simsbury is fundamentally and at its core a service organization committed to meeting the needs of our citizens. As such, the majority of our budget is people costs. I want to take a minute to publicly thank our town staff. Simsbury town employees are highly professional and dedicated individuals and are all the more impressive for what they're able to do with limited resources. And my wholehearted thanks to you, all of you out there tonight and those who couldn't make it today. This slide is important if you look at the bottom one box because it brings home the point that if we did nothing but meet our contractual salary obligations and everything else remained flat, the total budget would have increased 1.88%. As you know tonight, we're bringing you a 0.84% increase. As a people-driven budget, and given some of the press we hear out there about excessive salaries and benefits and other budgets, not near us, of course, I wanted to highlight what the town pays in benefits and salaries is far from excessive. And as you can see, the median town employee salary is $60,000. And you compare that with the median Simsbury household income salary of $117,000. The average Simsbury employee pension for government, general government, non-police is about just shy of $14,000, and for police it's about $33,000. So it's none of the high pensions that you hear about and read about in other towns across the country. In crafting this budget, the Board of Selectmen goal was to avoid an increase in taxes, compatible with the Board of Finance's goal and the Board of Education's goal. Careful consideration was given to what residents can afford to spend, and this budget was set within the context of state, local, and national economic considerations. And these are some of the same considerations that Peter mentioned, so I won't go through and read them all. In this slide, you can see the budget history with fiscal year 2010, if you look down there, as a response to the initial impact of the Great Recession. You'll notice that this year's proposed increase is below the last 3. So you really see a shift once the Great Recession hit. The response by the town is dramatic. Here you see how we compare to other towns, and you'll notice the dramatic 0.84. Thank you. This slide shows that the town's budget is a relatively small component of the overall budget, with most of the mill rate going to public education. Here you see that the median taxable assessment, based on an average home value of $277,000, brings you in with a median tax bill in Simsbury of approximately $7,436. On this slide, you see the yearly breakdown of taxes on the median tax bill. So, okay, we'll just go on. Here you see that broken down per month, and you'll notice that what goes to the town is less than many utility bills for homeowners, and I'll just highlight, that's $123 a month that you pay for all the town services you get. And these next few slides are absolutely my favorite. They lay out what value you get for your taxes. We're going to go a little bit slow here so that you can really take a hard look at the numbers. They're phenomenal. $123, this is what you get. Police protection, look at that, 31,000 police calls for service. Road paving and maintenance, 165 miles of town roadway that have to be cleared and sanded and salted every time there's a storm. Snow removal and treatments. Library services, take a look at that first number. And then the second number, pretty impressive stuff. Town hall services. We just had someone come in for a marriage license today. That's always the best part of my day when that happens. Engineering and capital project services. Emergency response. Parks, pools, and recreation services, and take a look at the users of Simsbury Farms pools, the rounds of golf, and the acres of open space the town maintains. Social services and the senior center, again, those numbers are pretty impressive. Okay. Going on, in this slide, we tried to show the impact again of the Great Recession on town budgets and the town's response to the economic conditions that resulted from that recession. In the last 6 years, the bottom part, during the recession, you see a modest 2.07% increase. In the 6 years prior to the recession, you see that there was a 33.29% increase over those years. So again, I think we can all be proud of how the boards of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Education have responded to the changed economic conditions. In getting to this proposed budget, to a 0.84% increase, the town was able to capitalize on savings from grants received and managed, pension investment returns, lower gasoline prices, employee contributions to pension and OPEB, and I'd like to recognize and thank our town employees in their negotiations for their willingness to contribute and help ease the budget impact on our residents. Negotiated telephone contract, thanks to Joe. He was able to negotiate a new contract that saved us $40,000 a year. And OPEB actuarial obligation declines, and we actually had a pension obligation decline as well there. And I'd like to thank the Board of Finance for working with both boards and making this possible. This slide shows the budget process we have followed so far, and we are here today at the public hearing for the Board of Finance, which is not listed. As part of the budget process, department heads requested a 4.36% increase over last year's budget. And again, I remind folks we're at a 0.84. None of the requests were unreasonable, and the current proposal was arrived at only after making difficult reductions. Although the current recommended budget does not contain all our department heads requested, it does capture and address essential needs. The first selectman's recommended budget to the Board of Selectmen reduced the budget to 1.7%. The Board of Selectmen, as we consulted in our budget hearings, added back line items totaling $122,309. After I submitted my budget to the Board of Selectmen, additional numbers came in with savings to our budget, and those savings were also captured with the help of the Board of Finance and working with both boards, with captured savings of $283,796, mostly from OPEB and pension ARC reductions, thanks in large part to the cooperative spirit fostered as I mentioned before, by the Board of Finance and working with the Board of Education. In summary, this budget maintains quality core services, fully funds contractual salary and pension requirements, funds 2 additional police officers, funds a new public works project administrator, restores funding to the assistant assessor position, and includes the contribution of $90,000 to Simsbury Farms. When we presented our budget, we also put out our capital improvement plan, which lays out for the community, for the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen projects that we see coming down the line. And some of those include Simsbury Farms rink and pool improvements, which you're going to hear about in the capital presentation by Jeff Shea, Ethel Walker Woods improvements, public works facility improvements, critical infrastructure repairs, public safety improvements and resources, and the senior community center construction, which we are not asking to go to bond for in May at this point. That will come at a later time. Here is the chart that Peter had in his presentation. And the reason why, I'll say something a little different than what Peter said on it, although what he said is absolutely valid. In the time since the Great Recession and low interest rates, some municipalities and towns across the nation have shown an increasing reliance on increased borrowing as a way to suppress budget growth. It's very tempting to do that when times are hard. What this slide shows is that Simsbury has continued to issue responsible budgets, all the while reducing debt service below that of 2009. So we're proud of that. And last are some of the key budget dates, and that's what I have for you. And with that, capital.
Move on to the capital budgets. As you can see by both of those operating budgets, you can see why our board is bullish on the operating budgets. They both are very responsible and maintain and actually improve services. So let's go on with the capital. We're going to have Jeff Shea start it off, and then Burke will do the Board of Ed projects.
Good evening. My name's Jeff Shea, town engineer. I want to give you a brief overview of the capital program for fiscal year 2016. First project in the program is the Simsbury Farms improvements, pool and rink improvements project. Just a little background, the ice rink and the superstructure was constructed in 1999. There's an existing warming area for spectators that was actually constructed in 1972. The project would include an evaluation of the refrigeration system for the ice rink. That's a major portion of the project. And also the painting of the superstructure that is presently peeling and needs to be protected for future. The pool complex was constructed in 1972. Some of the improvements included are the existing gutter system, which presently result in a significant loss of water, which is an operating expense that we could reduce. The structural repairs include repairs to the pool, the coping, the drains, and these are typical improvements expected during this I guess, portion or part in the life cycle of the pool, since it was constructed in 1972. Again, the scope of this project at the ice rink includes reconstruction of the closed seating area for the spectators, evaluation and upgrade of the refrigeration, as I had mentioned, painting of the superstructure, and the pool facility, again, the replacement of the main pool gutter facility, replacement of ladders and appurtenances on the deck, repairs the walls, drains, and surge tanks. And the diving pool and the training pool, repairs to the tile, coping, and coating of the walls to protect the structural integrity of that particular pool. The wading pool would include concrete skimmer repairs. And in the filter room that serves all the pools, all the mechanical equipment, valves, chemical pumps, flow controls would be replaced since they've reached the end of their life cycle. Next project on the capital program is the park improvements project at $508,000. This includes improvements at various locations of parks throughout town. At Simsbury Farm, there'd be a tennis court rehabilitation reconstruction project. Terrifield Park would include the rehabilitation or replacement of the pavilion, the playscape, and the tennis court. Memorial Park wading pool reconstruction and building improvements. Simsbury Farm and Memorial Pool would include a lightning protection program or a monitoring system to protect the users of those facilities. Also included would be miscellaneous park or fencing, irrigation, and lighting improvements at all parks. Playground accessibility improvements at the playgrounds, and a new basketball court at Simsbury Farm that was in the master plan from 1999. The open space planning and improvement projects includes $145,000 for the first year. This project is primarily improvements required at the Ethel Walker open space parcel that was recently, the last piece was acquired. Includes such thing as tree removal, invasive species removal, signage, boardwalks, et cetera, to allow the public to enjoy the facility to its fullest. The next project, the Weetog Planning Route 10 and Code Preparation Project for $57,000. This project was advanced by the Planning Department and includes complete planning and zoning code revisions similar that was completed recently to the downtown area, the center area, to allow the integration of transportation and the, I guess, more easy development through a zoning enhancement process for that area for future development. Next project is the highway salt shed replacement for $375,000. This project would allow us to store a more substantial supply of salt and purchase the salt sort of off-peak when we can get better pricing. The present facility is inefficient. It does not allow for sufficient storage of salt based on recent experience for winters that we're presently experiencing. Next project is the municipal building renovations project for $50,000. This includes a study of town hall, police department, and Board of Ed space needs that have changed since this facility was last renovated, I believe, in the 1970s. It also will consider things such as security and energy savings improvements that would be completed at a later year in the capital program. Next project is the dam evaluation and repair project. This $30,000 project in the first year will allow us to complete inspections required as a result of regulatory changes over the last year or two, and complete inspections at town-owned dams. We have about 5 dams in town that would need to be inspected under this program. Next project is the Public Works Complex Infrastructure Improvements Project for $280,000. This project addresses numerous, I guess, infrastructure needs at the Public Works facility, including such things as roof replacement, the installation of a fire sprinkler system to protect our equipment and investments, rolling stock that resides down in that facility, things like pump station connections to our sanitary sewer system. We presently operate on a individual system on site that's not sufficient for our needs. Water service upgrades to complement the sprinkler system and to provide water for a truck wash facility that's presently in the planning stages. Also energy saving projects through conversion of heating equipment. We're in the process of converting to gas at that facility, so additional equipment would be needed to be replaced as part of that changeover. Also roof insulation and upgrade to electrical service as part of the project. Town hall site and safety improvements for $45,000 would allow us to do site planning for that particular facility to improve access for vehiculars and pedestrians, improve pedestrian crossing across Route 10, that's become an issue as of late. Creating a security, improved security at the rear of the building for police and equipment storage, landscaping, and various sidewalk and curb improvements. Next project is the portable generator project for $80,000. This would be a shared purchase with the Water Pollution Control Authority and the town to use this portable generator as we need it for power outages and also for day-to-day use, again, by the WPCA. And this would be used at various locations as needed during power outages. Project planning funds for $28,000 would allow us, I guess, expenses required for capital planning in advance of these projects actually being on a capital program to do things like professional estimating, surveys, environmental investigations, and those types of professional services required to refine scopes and budgets for those projects. Various drainage improvements projects for $175,000 in the first year would support and complement the existing pavement management program that's ongoing. What we found is on a lot of these projects, we need to do improvements to drainage systems that are 50, 60, 70 years old prior to repaving the roadway to preserve the underground infrastructure before actual paving replacement. There's also a series of sewer use fund projects that I'm going to run through quickly here that are funded under the sewer use fund, and quickly sewer main extensions as residents request sewers, we investigate and fund those through this sewer use fund. So this fund would actually fund those projects as we see them coming in the near term. Inline grinder and screen replacement replaces a facility at the treatment plant that provides grinding and disposal of fines at the beginning of the pre-treatment process. This is again funded under the sewer use fund. Hot Meadow Center area sewer repairs for $135,000. This is a study phase that will allow us to determine what repairs need to be done in a very old section of sewer in the Hot Meadow Street Center area. West Mountain Road area interceptor sewer design for $50,000. This project will allow a study of the western portion of town to see what the cost and the feasibility is to extend sewers into that area. Portable generator project. This is the project funded under sewer use that complements the purchase of the generator discussed earlier. And the portable 6-inch dry pump is a portable facility used during emergencies and for bypasses required by the Water Pollution Control Authority. And with that, Burke.
Good evening. We have 3 projects for the Board of Education for this 2015-16 CIP year, and they are the District Network Infrastructure Project, $200,000, Central School, a portion of their roof replacement, $770,000, and some first phase of some climate control improvements in all 7 schools. First, a little bit more detail about the District Network Infrastructure Project. The primary amount of the funding, roughly $135,000, would go towards upgrades to the switching of our network, which connects all of our schools and also some town buildings, going on a tenfold increase to 10 gigabyte, and that's for our backbone. There's still some more switching that we would have to upgrade in future years. Server replacements, there are a total of 4 that we'd be looking to replace. 2 of those are domain controllers and some application servers. Also, wireless enhancements. We currently have wireless capability in all of our schools, and this would just be adding some specific locations to all of our schools. And lastly, we have our internet connection known as the CEN line, comes courtesy of the state, and it needs a new web filter. As I said earlier, at Central School, we have a portion of flat roof, so-called rubber roof. EPDM is the technical term. It's about 23 years old now, and so this would be eligible for partial reimbursement through the state. And because of the grant process involved with that, the earliest that we'd be able to start that would be summer of 2016, but we need to get the funding in place to be able to apply for the state grant. Now, more about the climate control project, this first phase. Again, it would be trying to make some limited improvements to localized areas of all 7 schools. All of our schools have, to a small degree now, certain areas that have AC. There's no school-wide AC as some of the newer buildings that some of our neighbors have in place. So we started out with hiring a firm to really study options. We worked with Fryer Associates out of Farmington, and we had them look at priority areas that had been determined by our principals in all of our schools, and we measured temperatures during those spring and fall times, and some rooms or some areas tend to be the warmest. So those are really the areas that we're trying to focus on. We looked at the most cost-effective methods, even looking at portable units for rooms as well as window units, all commercial grade, and there's a need in all cases to upgrade the existing power system, so those costs are also in these estimates. So ultimately what we are looking at is localized spaces, and then at the middle school and the high school we could do at least one larger gathering space. So just a little bit about the proposed method for most of the smaller spaces would be something called a ductless split system. We have experience with these currently. If you're familiar with the high school here, there's a conference room called D172 at the other end of the building that has one of these. We have a few of them at Henry James. As compared with the options I mentioned earlier regarding portables and window units, there's a longer life expectancy. They're definitely quieter. There's not floor space needed as there would be with those portables. The cost is slightly more, but ultimately we feel this is the most logical way to make some improvements. And then for some of those larger areas, we would take advantage of different systems designed for much larger cooling of larger spaces, and they have a much larger price tag. So that is our 3 projects for this evening.
As you can see, we have a lot of capital projects in total, but the dollars aren't significant, so they keep us well under our debt policy. I'd now like to go on to the public audience piece of the public hearing. We're done with all the presentations. So the way this works is we have mics on both ends. If people want to come speak, state your name, your address, and we're allowed 3 minutes to keep to the merits of what we discussed on the budget tonight. So, Mrs. Coe.
Hi, Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I'm addressing the proposed budget as a 40-year taxpayer of Simsbury, tenured teacher in the New York City school system, and a mother of 4 children that attended the Simsbury school system, and a candidate for the first selectman. The budget as proposed is full of deceit as a, quote, no increased taxes budget. However, there is an additional $2,740,000 for capital improvement projects that is approved by the Board of Finance, not the taxpayers at referendum. Many of these capital expenditures should be included in the operating budget, not capital improvement projects that are bonded. There are 13 expenditures ranging from $28,000 to $770,000. These expenditures will not be included in the referendum vote, but will be approved by the Board of Finance. I would urge the Board of Finance to review these line items and review these projects for compliance with your policy and remove many of these expenditures that should be moved into the operating budgets or eliminated completely. The capital improvement projects should not be used as a slush fund to increase spending without accountability. The town should be looking to lower the mill rate from 37.14, the highest mill rate in the valley, Avon 28.32, Canton 28.56, Farmington 24.44. Over the years, the town has positioned itself into a non-competitive mode for economic development since our taxes are the highest in the valley. It is our taxes that run the government, whether it's from the general funds, state funds, or tax increases. It is our taxes that run the government, all the savings from previous budgets should be returned to the taxpayers, not spent on offline budget items. Also, with the eventual loss of the Hartford, our highest taxpayer, we will have to make the drastic adjustments in our spending. Creative budgeting is not fiscally responsible. We should use the general fund to reduce the mill rate, $2.2 million from the general fund, returned to the taxpayers, which would reduce the mill rate by 1 point, lower taxes for real estate and cars. I urge the board to scrutinize and reduce expenditures before moving the budgets to referendum vote and Board of Finance vote on the presented budgets for offline budget items. I am pleased to see that the $8.1 million for the senior center was removed from the capital expenditures. The senior center should remain at Eno Hall with some renovations. Placing the senior center at the private Performing Arts Center has too many costly environmental and engineering challenges. It is incompatible with a concert
Mrs. Coe,
venue.
that's not on tonight's agenda, so if
I
you
know,
could
but I'm
stick
talking
to the
about the
merits.
salaries
Thank
for
you.
the increase in the cost for the architect and everybody else, which is in the expenditures.
Okay.
The expenditure for the survey that will not determine a consensus for the site and the RFP for architects should be removed for the budget. A decision on the placement of the senior center has to be made before any money is appropriated. We don't need surveys to tell us that the senior center at Eno Hall is the appropriate place for seniors. Thank you, and I'll come back to talk about the Board of Education. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Our board's having a meeting after this. We'll take some of your comments in that meeting. We'll discuss the capital there, and we always follow the charter and what we have to bring forward to the public for a vote at referendum. Yes, Mr. Kalishman.
Robert Kalishman, Simsbury. Mr. Chairman, Finance Chairman, asked, I couldn't disagree with you more. Ms. Hefner, first selectman of Simsbury, this is the worst budget I've ever seen. And for you to sit up there and say it's the best budget you ever seen is a travesty. You shouldn't side one way or the other. Do your job, sir. And what I'm speaking of is this $90,000 that's going to be allocated to the Simsbury Farm is irresponsible. Year after year after year, they come in with a deficit, and now you're going to give them $90,000, and I'll tell you right here and now, you're going to have another deficit. And the people want tax reform, and they want lower taxes. Now, I've taken the initiative to go to the Hartford Current, and for a week and a half, I've run an ad, and with your permission, I'd like to read it.
Does it pertain to the budget?
Yes, it does.
Go ahead.
Volunteers to oppose the town budget of Simsbury being presented by the town at the public hearing on April 8th, 2015. Call Robert Kalishman, 860-658-0265, candidate for first selectman. And the purpose of that is to let the people know what's going on. And I've had many inquiries of people that have called me and say that they're ready to join me and go and fight this budget. Now, case in point, you're adding 2 police officers to the police department. This was asked for by me a year ago with the previous select woman. I asked her for additional policemen. And now what you're doing, you're trying to do it with smoke and mirrors. You're telling me you're going to hire 2 policemen for $80,000. And what are you going to do about the dispatchers? You need police dispatchers. What are you going to send policemen out and nobody tell them where to go? And plus the fact we had a murder on Einhorst Boulevard, and if we had the proper lighting and the proper sidewalks, that would have never occurred in my opinion. And you should be adding 4 people to the police department, and you should be adding a better communication system than what they have. And you should start studying the fact about these cameras, which are important. And you're irresponsible with your public safety budget. These men deserve better than what they're getting. And what you're doing is with the public employees, in my opinion, and the police department employees, you're balancing your budget. That's irresponsible in my book.
Okay, thank you for your comments. On Simsbury Farms, I think it was about 5 years ago, I mean, it was 6 years ago, the Board of Selectmen used to have a line item, 2 line items in their budget. One of them was for Simsbury Farms. I believe it was like 60-some odd thousand, and then they would pay some more of the overhead, which totaled around the 90,000. So that had been changed quite a few years ago, and it didn't work because it created a deficit. Simsbury Farms used to make money back then. Between the recession and the takeaway of that money caused them to go into a deficit. So that's why we came up with the solution we did for the 90. So we think that will solve that problem. As far as the police, I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that. There's questions on the police if you want to.
Thank you, Peter. I want to invite Chief Ingridson up. We feel we are meeting the needs of the citizens with the police department. We're proud to support our police department. We are adding 2 police officers to this year's budget and look forward to welcoming them. We do community policing in the town of Simsbury, which is more than just law enforcement. It's about public safety. We've received national accreditation to this. I'd just like the chief to speak. I believe I have his full support, that we have been fully supportive of his budget, but I'll let him confirm that.
Thank you very much. We requested the 2 officers for the police department, which will bring us up to a total of 38, which will keep us at our ratio for the state of Connecticut at 1.5 per population of 1,000 residents. Did receive full support from the Board of Selectmen as well as the Police Commission and the Board of Finance in its presentation. So our 2 officers are geared and should take care of us with our expansion that we're expecting after the first of the year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, next.
Hi, Debbie Driscoll, 10 Kings Road. Just a brief statement. Thanks. I'm asking the taxpayers to please support the Board of Ed budget as it stands now with the 1.3 increase. As proposed, the budget maintains current student services and appropriate staffing and was created excuse me, in close collaboration with the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance. With the current proposal, there will be a decrease in our mill rate. It is a fiscally responsible budget that will in fact continue to create great schools for each and every child. In addition, please support the capital improvements budget item that includes the renovation of the warming room at Simsbury Farms. The warming room in question will be used by thousands of Simsbury Youth Hockey Association families, as well as visiting team spectators over many years. The current facility is antiquated and does not fit the amazing renovations that were recently completed at the farms. I believe that all of the proposed renovations will ensure that Simsbury Farms facility will be fiscally stable into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening. My name is David Bush, 4 Catherine Lane, and I am the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission. Bet you all can't imagine what I'm up here to say. That what really is responsible about this budget is exactly what this budget is all about on the capital improvement side. We have spent our dollars wisely in maintaining equipment, but before that equipment becomes totally deteriorated and has to be replaced in an emergency situation where you all would realize you pay a far higher price, the equipment is being replaced. This equipment has gotten beyond its normal useful life in the range that is accepted within the industry. And the idea that we do this on a planned, fiscally responsible budget in the manner which is being proposed is exactly what you want from your elected officials and the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. That is exactly what's occurring here this evening in these proposals. Likewise, the proposal also includes us doing work at the farms that is consistent with the master plan. This master plan has already had tax dollars spent on it, made recommendations that for years were ignored, and are now finally being recognized. This is the type of budget you should be proud to support. It is the type of capital improvements that are fiscally responsible, and in particular at Simsbury Farms. Like I said, I'm sure you were surprised that I might support that. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all of your volunteer service.
Thank you very much. Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul Simeon. I'm at 33 West Mountain Road. This is my first meeting ever to attend, and I'd like to say it's been very, very informative. Thank you to all of the boards who go through and do all of the work. It's fascinating sitting here watching this go on. But I'm here to represent Simsbury Youth Hockey. I'm the VP of Hockey Operations. We have over 350 kids in our program that use Simsbury Farms on a daily basis during the winter months of November to the middle of March. We absolutely would recommend and support improving the warming house area. This is where on weekends where we play between 5 and 6 games every day on Saturday and Sunday where we're renting the ice. We are your largest client at Simsbury Farms, where not only do we have the Simsbury residents, but we have our visitor residents, the visitors that come in. And it's the only area that is used where families can put smaller children who come to watch the games. And in particular, we all know how bad this winter was. It got used a lot. We recommend also the improvements to the equipment to maintain the ice, which includes the chiller and the condensers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Would anyone else like to speak?
I would like to address the Board of
State your name
Ed.
and
26 Whitcomb Drive, Joan Coe.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to address my comments to the Board of Education. I am very concerned that we have lost our ability to teach effectively under the mandates that have been imposed by the state.
Mrs. Coe, if you could keep it to the budget, not...
The mandates drive the budget. He said it at the budget thing. We just talked about the mandates, correct? Mandates cost money. You have the buses, you have everything. That's the mandates.
There's no control of
The school, excuse me, listen to the rest of my speech.
Okay, go on, please. Try to keep it to budget items only.
The school's delivery of education to our children is now under the umbrella of a non-competitive Wall Street firm called Pearson. Pearson is the largest profit education testing and publishing company and is used nationally by all systems, including the state of Connecticut and the Simsbury school system. We should not have Wall Street mandating educational practices to Main Street. The organization was chosen by the federal government to enhance No Child Left Behind, morphed into the Common Core and Smarter Balance testing. All education material must be purchased from Pearson and tablets from Google to test the students at an additional cost of $111,000 in expenditures for the tablets and more expenditure in time and money allotted to teaching to the test. The teachers are used for testing in conjunction with the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, SBAC. What does Wall Street Corporation, Pearson, do with the data? Since Pearson is a single source of all tested data, it is alleged that they are data mining the students. Parents, teachers, boards of education, administrators, and legislators from all districts should opt out of this costly educational experiment called Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, SBAC, and return to the fundamentals of curriculum-based teaching, which will reduce the costs of education and lower the undue stress placed on students and teachers. I cannot accept that we are told that the increased expenditure in education is attributed to unfunded mandates. All mandates should be evaluated yearly to evaluate their effectiveness. It appears that money is being spent for mandates that have run its course and is no longer effective. We need proactive boards of education, administrators, and legislators that push back on many of the mandates. We should not be funding failed mandates. And many of these mandates and state budgets are funneling money away from public boards of education. Thank you for your time.
Mrs. Cohen, on some of those comments, we're probably not going to answer them because they probably should go to a Board of Education meeting directly, and they really don't pertain to the budget tonight, so we're probably not going to answer those, and if there's anything financial, they'll probably get back to you. Does that sound reasonable? Thank you.
But I just wanted to make my comment.
Mr. Kalishman. Name and address, please.
Robert Kalishman, Simsbury. The Board of Education, in their benevolency, has handed me out a folder. Excellent. And I'd like to refer them and Mr. Goldman to your chart, a 10-year comparison of the Board of Education's budget. And I look at this, and I don't want to nitpick, but I look at it, and it's a 10-year comparison, and every year it's gone higher and higher and higher. This year we've had students. There's a reduction in the student population, and the other thing I like to address, and I may be reaching on this, but let me see if the chairman will let me address it. I attended a meeting on the budget at the town hall on the second floor, and at that meeting we were discussing lockers and improvements for this year, and the subject came up with the students had written the people of the board, and they had written the school, and they had said that they didn't need brand new lockers, that the lockers that they had would suffice for another 50 years or whatever. I didn't read the letter, but that was the gist of the letter. Now, and at that time, the superintendent stood up and very, very adamantly, I must add, I can't emphasize it enough, insisted that he have those lockers. That it was a terrible thing for the students to challenge him. And Mr. Goldman, are these the things that I want to pay every nickel that's given to the children, and I want to give the children more, but I don't want to waste it. And that's exactly what you and your men are doing. And this air conditioning that you want to put in, that's ridiculous.
Mr. Kalishman, on the lockers, that came up last year at the public hearing. Our board addressed it, and subsequently were satisfied, and I think you'll find if you review the tapes of those meetings that there was a favorable outcome, that the students actually signed a petition after the young lady spoke, and they had some communication, I believe, with the school principal, and actually came out with a better result, and the students were totally not sure on what they were doing, and I think they ended up with a better product as a result of that. We slowed it down. I think there was satisfaction that the process was done right. Our board felt comfortable, and then we advanced the funds. But we did slow it down, and that was last year's budget. It did happen after the budget season, and we gave them the funds, and I believe it listened to all parties, and I believe there was a very favorable solution. As far as Mr. House, we're not here to debate. As far as the enrollment numbers, his question on enrollment, would you like to address those statistics, that 10-year chart?
Thank you for your input, and you highlight a struggle that we go through every year. You're right on your analysis of the 10-year history. Costs have gone up while enrollment's gone down. We struggle with this. I think what it has done, it's enabled us to keep our budget increases below, I think, 1.6 or 1.8% every year for the last 6 or now maybe now 7 years, including this year. But it's a struggle. You know, we get, Mrs. Coe mentioned increased mandates. We get increased mandates every year. The cost of providing services go up, the cost of contracts go up. We try to balance that against cost savings we can get from enrollment decreases. We're able to keep our increases as a result pretty modest, but it's a challenge, and we'll continue to struggle with it in the coming years.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? If so, please come up to the mics. Anyone else in the audience like to speak? If not, we're going to close the public audience portion of this hearing, and thank you all and SCTV for showing it. We really appreciate the opportunity to communicate the budget out to the voters, and so we're going to close the public hearing, and we're going to take about a 5-minute break, then our board is going to go into its meeting in about 5 minutes. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.